So Golden Prelude, if you were intentionally trying to go fast 9, you're basically just looking for econ augments early on.
Yeah, yeah, I would aim for an econ augment. Well, here's the thing: you should go for an econ augment if your opener is bad.
Mm,
If your opener is good, it's probably you're better off trying to full win streak, and that way you can sort of guarantee essentially the same amount of econ. So like here, right before you had the Tom Kench, I think. Did I remember
hmm
that correctly? If we go back,
Yeah.
so Tom Kench, really solid frontline. If you wanted to win streak, right, it would be good to hold on to the Kench because next shop you see that you get like the Cho'Gath pair, so you can actually play
Mm,
around Mythic. And this is the thing about early game. A lot of the times in early game, the units that you buy is going to be dictated by the items that you get dropped, right? So here, if you get tier start, you have to aim a bit more towards the AP line. So I think that buying the Yasuo is also good if you're buying the Yasuo, but the two main AP lines that I can think of in the early game are going to be like the Mythic with Cog or some kind of faded board with Ari plus Yasuo, right? So
hmm
if you get the Tom Kench, it's good to keep it just to keep that open, right? That's sort of something that I would potentially suggest. But
Okay.
yeah, we can just keep going. I don't think there's any reason to hold Kha'Zix just because I think Kha'Zix is an unclickable unit right now. But that's just like slightly meta related, right? Um,
Yeah. So I think in this game, Kha'Zix is exalted, and I was just holding him in case I hit one of the other exalted
I
outs.
see. I see.
But yes, I
Yeah,
agree.
I think like it's not too it's not that big of a deal to have exalted in early on. I think like the one extra XP you get per round is you're essentially saying I'm going to lose. And if you're going to lose, you might as
Mm,
well play fortune instead, right? Like holding out for exalted units is even worse than like holding out for fortune units if you're trying to lose streak. Unless it's like
okay.
really easy. If it's like only one cost and you have all of them, then you can get it in. But outside
Right.
of that,
Okay.
okay.
So as far as augments go here, I have been playing a good amount of Ghostly, which could have been a line to take, but although I
Mm-hmm.
think I had the Jax, like the Shen Senna reroll line, as a possibility
Yeah,
since I have a bow.
the thing is, taking the ghostly crest with only a bow is a little bit awkward because it means you can't really slam any items unless you're willing to slam a knight's vow, right?
Hmm
Or whatever the is that what it's called?
Protector's
The
Vow.
Yeah, protector's vow. If you're willing to slam protector's vow and you're willing to then just play around the bow, that's like okay, but not being able to slam is not that great. Obviously, like you have the Alawi, which is okay. You can really. I mean, it's a broken trait, right? So obviously, you might be able to hard force your way into it, but you're not going to be able to win streak, right?
Hmm
So you're essentially playing for later on, which is also fine. But I think that the most consistent way to climb is to play around strong early, right?
Right.
But yeah, I
Okay.
mean, prize fighter, you probably 100% skip. That
Yep.
one's really not something to consider. Yeah, and so I think all of these options are pretty good. It's just essentially what line you're trying to play.
Between Raining Gold and Patient Study, it seems like what Patient Study, if you, it could, Patient Study, if you lose streak stage two, like breaks even after like pretty much at stage three, right?
Yeah, so I mean, this is something where I would just kind of default like you have the stats thing right here, right? In this
Hmm
instance, I would just be like, okay, just take Raining Gold. They're both econ augments, but one is probably going to get me more value if I want to win rounds anyways, right? Compared to a patient study, you're probably going to get less out of it. I mean, I would just evaluate your bench here, right? If you're considering patient study, you should just evaluate the bench and think about can you or can you not win streak, right? And if you can't
Right.
win streak, maybe you take patient study. But if you look like it looks like you have strong units and you have solid pairs and upgrades, then you probably end up taking Raining Gold instead.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay. Okay. I'm not certain about the Titan Slam here.
Hmm.
So big thing is like item economy, right? Titans, if you're slamming Titans, right, you have to think about what it's going to end up in the end game. Whenever you slam an item, there are like certain items where you can just slam it whenever you want and it'll probably be fine, right? Like the really good items like Morello or Knight's Vow or like red buff, something like that. Something that can fit on every comm is something that you probably want to slam immediately, right? The thing about Titans, and there are other items like this, you have to think about like what uses the Titans because not every unit can use Titans well. Because you're sacking an offensive component and a defensive component to make the Titans, and it really functions the best on melee carries, right? Outside of that, there's not too much value in the item, I would say. So, you know, if I were trying to win streak here, right? Because if you're slamming Titans, you're trying to win streak, right? If you're slamming the
Hmm.
item, you're trying to win. I'd say the better thing to do is to just level and play the Alawi, right? And then chain the Yasuo because the Titans is not going to make that big of a difference on him. And then you can do something like tier the Ari, and if you really wanted to, you can slam Shiv. If you're aiming to play like legendary AP, then slamming Shiv is perfectly fine, right? You're going to lose a
Hmm.
tier, but you can always get other mana. Like you just need one more tier. That's sort of what I would suggest. The thing is, like, Yasuo doesn't actually use Titans that well because he's not exactly a melee carry, right? He's how he functions is kind of more a pure tank. So an item like gargoyles or hard, the what is it called, steadfast or crown
Hmm.
guard are all going to be better on him in general than just the Titans because he doesn't have built-in sustain. And when you don't have built-in sustain, especially Titans is like not the ideal slam. That's sort of what I would say there. Yeah, I mean,
So if I had a BT that I could slam with the Titans, it'd be better.
yeah, BT or a unit that had built-in sustain already, something like an early Volibear, right? Or even if like if you have early Yone and you're gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna commit to playing Yone, and I know I'm always gonna make a Titans, then you can slam the Titans, right? So it's just a matter of what you think you're gonna play.
Hmm.
So yeah, but yeah, like if you're gonna lose this round anyways, then you don't need to slam the full item, right? That's actually a
Right.
very important thing about like item economy is that when you only slam if you want to win, right? You can slam components, that's okay, but committing to the full item, that's like a bigger deal. So,
Hmm.
you know, in those instances, sometimes you can just avoid it.
Okay. So I think my overall game plan was like trying to think I can play through possibly Yone and Alun as like a melee carry backline AP and then transition into Kane and Morgana and then move those to was it Udyr or Wukong and then
Mm-hmm.
with one of the legendary backline AP carries.
Right. So, what I would say about that, you've essentially gone through like three different comps, right? And so that takes resources. It takes resources to transition. If you're transitioning like three different times across like
Hmm.
and those are like expensive comps, right? You're talking about three cost carry into four cost carry into five cost carry. That's probably not going to be too viable. It's like very difficult. Like you're gonna have to skip one of those steps if you want to reach the final step of like getting legendaries, right?
Right.
Um, so in those instances, like obviously you can play around. You can play around the Yone, and you can. But if that's the case, I would recommend like leaning more towards the AD line, right? If I'm slamming Titans already, if the only AP unit that can successfully use my Titans is Udyr, then I probably lean more towards the other side, right?
Okay.
That's just sort of how I would think about it.
Okay. So then here, if I'm just trying to preserve HP, it's like get more traditional tank items for Yasuo, like a stone plate or something, since he's my strongest unit right now.
Yeah. I mean, what it comes down to is like you have to have direction, right? So if this is the very important thing, is like you kind of have to, once you commit to your items, again, if they're not like the super high tier flexible stuff, you have to really make the decision to commit to a comp, because like I said before, it takes resources to transition, which means that if you're committed to some playing something and you're slamming in that direction, you're going to be a lot better off than slamming suboptimal items and also trying to be like very wide, right? That's the sort of idea. Obviously, like, if you're trying to play AP, then you go like Shiv Gargoyles here, right? You could have had like Shiv, Bramblebest, Shiv, Sunfire. That would have been like pretty solid for a win streak. I mean, in this instance, I would just think about, okay, Titans here. If I'm playing Yone, I need healing, right? So what's the fastest way for me to get to healing? This tier needs to be built into a Hodge, like ASAP. And if I'm playing Yone, I'll take the Rod. That can be like an item for a Loon. That's sort of what I would
Okay.
be thinking about.
Or like a double Titans.
Yeah, Double Titans is also okay. It's I would lean more towards getting the healing first, right? Because that's how
Okay.
you need to be thinking about how to enable the items that you already have. Okay, so this is three components. So you go like the Double Titans first here. The thing about the Double Titans is that it's still not gonna let you streak. So
Right.
importantly,
Because I have
like,
no sustain.
yeah, no sustain. So that's like, you when you're slamming items, it's all about how you enable your items. That's like the most important thing. Like, even if you have this Yone, right? The thing about the Yone is that without the sustain, he's not going to be able to make use out of the Titans that well, because he doesn't have inbuilt sustain. He has like the shield that he gets whenever he ults. But after that, if he goes back and he's lost all of his health, he's not going to be able to get all the way back up, right? So now you have sword tier, both halves of healing components on the Ari and double Titans. It may or may not work out, but like as the higher you go, as people play stronger boards, it's not going to work out that well to have double Titans here without
So
some
even if
form
I,
of sustain.
yeah, I mean, normally I would, if I were playing normally, I would definitely lean towards Yone reroll here.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
I'm like trying to play with the intent of practicing this fast nine board. So I'm like,
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's fine. It's like, it's definitely, if you're planning on going the fast nine board and you've taken the econ augment to go with it, it's just that your item slams also have to work well with it,
don't
right?
support that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's like the main thing, is like, if you're saying, oh, I'm gonna play one comp and your item slams suggest something else, that's just like, it's gonna be it's gonna be rough to one get there, and by the time you do get there, you're gonna still lose rounds. And if I would sack all of my health to play this like AP legendary board, and then I just lose to some person playing reroll later on because my items aren't great, then it's not going to be worth it, right?
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, you're win streaking here, which is great. I think that I do want to see what the mid game looks like, just to see how the item slams end up working out. But
Yeah.
like, this is a solid bench, right? This is a great bench. The Yone, it's eventually you're probably going to want to move items, but it's probably pretty far off.
Yeah. Even if
Yeah,
I
I'm
wanted to
curious to see.
play like towards legendary, I could have still went Titans healing and then tried to get like AP items later, and that
Yeah,
would have
yeah,
preserved me more HP.
yeah, yeah. But
I think a
that
lot of
sounds
the
good.
idea behind my slamming items is just preserve HP.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that is. I wouldn't say there's anything wrong with that, but there are, you don't have to slam like any form of items, right? Like, you can slam Shiv, you can slam pure tank, right? And that's like pure tank Udyr. Honestly, is probably a bit better than like just Titans Udyr, because he's not really gonna kill units, right? He's going to kind of
Hmm.
keep them there and stall it while your backline does most of the damage. It's just a minor thing, right?
Okay. So going back to the sustain thing, Harmesis like really jumps out right now.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Harmesis is really good here.
If
Yeah,
not
and
Harmesis, probably big grab bag since best friends doesn't work well with the Umbral.
yeah. I would probably do the same exact thing. I would reroll best friends. I don't think big grab bag is like that great, and it's definitely not as good as Harmesis in this spot.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
in general, best
I,
friends is
I
like a pretty good augment, but it's just doesn't work out too well here.
don't know if I was thinking Harmacist enough. Or clearly I re-rolled the other two, but then for some reason
Hmm.
I think I took
I mean, you have
Idealism.
some other idealist. So idealism is good. I think that idealism is good. It's particularly good if you know that you're going to play Yone, because like just the
Yeah.
additional crit chance of damage works really well on him, and you can take it right now. It's essentially just the worst version of Harm Assist in this particular spot, right? In general, idealism might be better or worse than Harm Assist, but specifically right now, I think it's slightly worse than Harm Assist, just because you get it on like one unit, and it's a Yasuo who's not really meant to be like the main DPS per se. But it's good. It's just like you get the sustain that you need on him, right?
My interpretation would have been that with Idealism, I'd be stronger now but weaker later. You're saying that Harmacist would actually be stronger now than Idealism?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Because it's not that it's mainly where the items are, right? It's just about how the units function, and
right.
I
Like
think
Yasuo
that
just
you
doesn't deal
have
enough
your
damage.
yeah, Yasuo doesn't deal enough damage. Plus, you have your items split across two carries right now, right? You have Double Titans Yasuo plus the Ari, and you have all of
Mhm.
these other like sort of frontline melee carries, right? You have the Darius, you have the Yone, you have the Kindred, right? If you take Idealism, none of them are going to benefit from that augment, right? The only unit that's going to benefit from Idealism is whoever you put the Hodge on, because you only have one Hodge. If you take Harmesis, and this is the thing about Harmesis, like in this particular spot with what your board looks like, you have like two-star Kindred, you have Yone, they're all gonna benefit from the healing, right? They're all gonna benefit from that augment. It's gonna be probably better than the idealism. The thing is, idealism is really nice with the Yone board because you're essentially like, oh, I have this main carry that's Yone. I don't really care about what happens to the other people on the board, but Yone, if he's dealing out the DPS and he's one shotting stuff and he's sustaining up, that's great. But in general, I'd say that Harm Assist is better,
Okay.
particularly
So
in this spot if you're
Idealism,
trying to streak. Yeah.
right. Idealism would be better if I was pretty much committing to Yone reroll, and then
Hmm.
otherwise Harmless
Hmm.
is probably better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Because like late game, not everybody's going to use these items that well anyways, right? At least on the legendary side. Oh, this person's position pretty weird. Yeah, I think Harmesis, for example, probably does a little bit better here. The rest of your board is going to live a lot longer. You might be
Mhm.
able to preserve streak a bit more, get a little extra econ out of that.
Is there a world that you roll here since I have so many pairs?
Uh,
I have volley pair and
if
shop too.
yeah. So I'd say not at 3-3. So in 3-2, like if you're fighting for your streak and you're trying to keep your streak, then it's perfectly valid. I think that you should be rolling, right? If you think, oh, I have a lot of value pairs that I can hit, that's when you roll because then you can move your items more properly. You can do a lot of, you can keep your streak. The moment you lose streak on 3-3, you don't, you rule out that option essentially. Because what are you like
Okay.
rolling for? You have worse odds. You're not keeping any streaks, or you're not making extra econ out of it. It's a lot better to just like maybe find some point on level 7 to roll, or just you know try to push 8, push 9, see what you can do there, right?
Mhm. And am I like going too wide trying to hold this volley pair as well?
Yeah, the volley pair is a bit too wide. I mean, I don't think it's that terrible. I didn't look at what you sold there, but The problem with the volley pair is that you just need a lot of vertical duelists to make it work, right?
Right.
And you already have this gold in the Loon, right? If you have the money in the Alune and you have the Kindred too, it doesn't make too much sense to hold volley anymore. So
Hmm.
you can save econ that way, and then your bench, like what you're holding on your bench, can be more tailored towards what you think you're going to play in the end game. Okay.
So right now I'm like basically thinking I want to eventually land on Yone holding the Titans with the Hodge.
Uh huh.
Morgana and Kane could then be the, well, Elune would hold the items that Kindred have right now, and then eventually I could move that to Morgana. But like you
Yeah.
mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
that's probably a really expensive transition,
Yeah. Yeah. And
especially
also,
if I'm trying to go nine.
I'm gonna be super honest here. I think that if a loon has these items, there's zero point in moving them onto Morg because she's not really an AP carry. She's
Mhm.
like as a damage carry, she's actually probably worth like Morg 2 is probably either the same or most likely slightly to a lot worse than a Lune 2. Um it's just like sort of an evaluation of the units. I think that she's not that great as a carry. She's like great as a synergy bot, but I
Mhm.
mean, if she gets buffed, maybe. But just from my experience, she's not the strongest. Yeah.
Okay.
So here, two are a few options here. Wrath of the Moon, I think, is like so good that like if you look at your items and your units, I would just like hard commit and take that, and I probably wouldn't give it a
Commit
second
reroll.
thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's not really any point to take I mean, but the thing is, if you're experimenting, then you probably don't take Wrath of the Moon ever. And if you're trying to go fast nine, you just skip that, right?
Yeah, that was my mindset here because I've done Yone and the Loon reroll a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
I've taken Wrath of the Moon, so I'm like, okay, I know how that's going to end up, and this is like a
Mm-hmm.
great spot for it too.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
was like, I kind of want to figure out this fast nine thing.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, that's perfectly reasonable to try it out. Yeah, and you probably just skip it, and then we'll see what else there is. Okay.
The Martyr just seems like, okay, if I'm going to have more units on my board, that's pretty good.
Uh huh. Uh huh. Yeah, Martyr is all right. I probably would lean. I mean, the Rod is good, and this is specifically because your board doesn't have Shred. So if you're planning on playing Legendary AP and you just check your items, then Magic One is out of at least out of these three is probably your best option. You already have some healing, but you can, yeah, that's sort of how I would think about it. It's just like, what would I need in this spot? Like, if I'm trying to play AP, what am I missing, right? And the big thing you're
Hmm.
missing right now is Shred.
Okay.
So this is
So going
fine.
back to our original discussion, you're saying I probably shouldn't have rolled there,
I mean,
and
just to
like so many
stabilize is
pairs.
fine. If you have a lot of pairs, it's probably worth it to roll in this spot. You're on four streak,
Okay.
right? You're 4-2. Rolling here is
Hmm.
actually very good because one, you might be able to keep streak, and that translates to econ, right? So, I don't think that's incorrect at all.
Okay.
I think some of the units on your bench you might be able to sell, probably.
Yeah.
Like if I sold more Aurelia plus maybe like Diana, because you don't have Sage on your board right now, that's already like an econ breakpoint, right?
Hmm.
Um, and that's you look at your items again. What can you play with these items? You have to like be asking yourself that, right? And maybe like at the time you didn't know, like you were potentially planning on moving the items to Morgue, so that's I guess that's reasonable. But like in reality, I really is never going to end up on this board, right? Like her specifically, she's not going to see the light of day here, and she costs a lot of gold. You can sell that, and you can make 40, right?
Okay.
Yeah, like there are ways to make econ here, but if you keep streak, it's fine. Yeah, yeah. So she's gone. That's good, and that's pretty solid. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, and so this, it's probably good enough to go fast nine with. I would assume because like your full streak 85 health. The one thing that I might suggest here is just to see, like, do you have Exalted in right now?
I do not.
Uh,
So, or I have one
so you're one out of
exalted.
three.
Yeah, I think Nautilus was exalted. I forget who on this board was exalted.
Yeah, yeah, because
Shen was exalted.
in this spot, right? If you're streaking and you're level 8, you can think about potentially fitting in some units to play Exalted just to
Hmm.
reach to help you reach 9, and it's like not that bad of a board, right? Like getting the additional damage amp with Exalted is actually quite good. So yeah, there's just in general, um, and like at this point, if you're thinking about the legendaries, I mean, yeah, it's all good. It's all good. Just keeping streak if you can get it. Honestly, like losing streak here is not that big of a deal. What what I would suggest is somewhat helpful is to kind of lean towards a specific direction in a sense. Like if you're planning on playing the Zero Hui line, just figuring out what your front line is going to be. So
Hmm.
particularly committing to either the Heavenly Dragon Lord side or the other direction. That's partially based off of what units you currently have. I think that the
And
most
just like
important,
holding too many frontline options is what you're saying?
yeah, yeah, it's sort of, it just makes things a bit too complicated.
Yeah, that happens a lot for me.
Yeah,
I think
and
I'm trying to
you
keep
like,
too many options open.
yeah, yeah, like eventually you're gonna have to commit, and the most like the rule of thumb out there are like two things you should do is like one, scout to see what frontline other people in the lobby are playing, but two, just
Uh-huh.
like what you currently have on inventory, right? So like I have Orn plus not, right? Those are the more important units that I would think about compared to like the heavenly units, because on heavenly the most important units are actually the legendary. Like the heavenly dragon lords are like Rakan and Wukong are probably the more important ones to think about.
Hmm.
Yeah, what I would think about this game right now is that it's very likely that you're going to fall off in comparison to some of the rest of the lobby. That's just kind of my hypothesis based off of the items in a sense. Like the items in the
Specifically the two
particular,
Titans.
yeah, the two titans and like the line that you're aiming to play, because you're aiming to play AP, right? And like you're in a great spot health wise and econ wise, but the thing is you're kind of lacking in terms of like the in game combat potential. But you know, we'll see how things play out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my whole thing with keeping so many options open too is when I do these roll downs, I get super dizzy because I'm
Yeah, yeah,
not
yeah.
focusing on like kind of really what's the most important, like you mentioned,
Mm-hmm,
is
mm-hmm,
it's basically Hui, Azir, and like a strong front line, right?
yeah, yeah. That's it, essentially. You know, the main thing is like you want to get one of those two backliners upgraded, and then you just want to build out your front line. So like, you know, you have in the team planner all of these units, right? But that's like all of them, you know,
Yeah.
and you know, trying to fit everything on the board is going to be a bit rough. Sometimes you just have to commit to looking for a particular thing.
And then like you mentioned, Morg is not really doing much for
Yeah,
me.
yeah, she's honestly, you would be better off with these items still on the Lune, but you know, that's what the learning experience is about.
Yeah.
um yeah, you know, this is like a solid board now. I think double titans Hodgley Sin is a little bit awkward. I honestly would probably
Mhm.
have these items on the Silas,
Oh.
because one, you don't have duelist in for the Lee Sin, but like standalone he's just a stronger unit. If you had, for example, like 2-star Rakan, it's actually quite good on Rakan as well, because
Oh, okay.
it's just in general like you can stick most the carry items on him outside of like 80 items. But Rakan is actually like a very, very strong unit, I would say. Yeah, this is all good. I think the 4 Invoker is a little bit awkward because you already have the Shojin and your front
Hmm.
line isn't exactly there yet. So what I
Yeah.
would suggest here is to drop the Lilia and try to get some more upgraded front line.
Makes sense.
But I mean, you're doing well in the lobby. It looks like. I mean, the Zero 2 is huge. Zero 2 is really good.
Yeah. Also, usually I don't think I've ever done a coaching session where I'm actually showing a top four, but I wanted
Mm-hmm.
specifically this one because I've been trying to figure out this Fast Nine thing, and I feel
Mm-hmm.
like even when I'm top four, I'm probably messing up a lot. So
Mm-hmm. This is a ooh oh. I mean, oh, that's kind of gross. Yeah, Ghostly is just really really strong, I'd say. But also like it's kind of look if you look at that fight, right? I think a good the main explanation for why you lost, I would say, is probably because of Frontline. Less so
Frontline.
than how your items were built out. It's mostly about how the front line looks and just like board quality wise. Like this person has essentially their entire front row upgraded, right?
Yeah.
And those are all like really solid frontline units. Itemless Diana, for example, not going to do much, right? The
Mhm.
Lee Sin is probably going to get one tapped as well. And that's sort of where it comes down to like really frontline upgrades
So would
are
you
going to make the
have
difference.
rolled at nine there to just get at least Orn two before trying to go 10?
Yeah, I would try to get Orn 2 or even like the Rakan. Um,
Hmm.
or something to replace some of these invokers for sure.
Yeah.
Particularly like the Lilia is not doing too much. I would say probably not much at all. But
So same thing, my front line just wasn't strong
yeah,
enough.
yeah. It's just the front line. Yeah, I mean like big thing I would say there. Like obviously like the biggest late game mistake was just pushing 10, right? Like that person, if I look at their board, I think like the last person you played outside of the Wukong 2, their backline wasn't upgraded yet, right? Is that so?
The
You
ghostly guy?
probably not the well, even the ghostly guy, yeah, the ghostly guy and the guy that you ended up dying to, like this
This
board
guy,
with like the
yeah.
Hui. Like, let me look at this. The main difference here
Hoi
is just like
one.
Wukong 2, Orn 2, but they have Hui 1, right? So you like your
Yeah.
the difference here is your backline is upgraded, and that's great, right? That's perfect. Your frontline quality compared to their frontline quality is vastly different. And like
Hmm.
this is sort of what I'm saying with the items. So you have like essentially three of your completed items are sunk into the Lee Sin, who it's just like a Lee Sin, right? No synergies outside of Dragon Lord, but Dragon Lord is for the whole team, right? It's not exactly
I
for
think I threw in an Aurelia for duelist, but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I,
Like
th
they're
I think the
really
point's still taken. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's like Lee Sin is not really frontline. Outside of six duelists, he doesn't really have that much going for him defensively, right?
Mm.
So this fight here, if you had, the Orn 2, you had like Behemoth, if you some like even if it was just Orn 1, but you had like an Udyr 1 as well, you're probably going to be doing better off. And that it is kind of coming back to, what we were talking about at the beginning of the game, where you have a lot of items here that aren't offering you too much value to the board. Like I think maybe if you end up with the Udyr 2, that's slightly different, right? But if I had something like Steadfast Gargoyles instead, or even just the Harm Assist, right? That could make a huge difference in this fight.
Yeah.
Because what it comes down to is if you look at your second augment, that's supplied on one unit. And like if we look at how this fight plays out, I don't think that Lee Sin is going to last that long during the fight.
Yeah.
Uh,
And then Azir's just taking chip damage in the back.
yeah, yeah. So like he goes down before your main frontliner goes down, and that's like a pretty bad sign, right? If you're like
Hmm.
double Titans Hodge, where the Hodge is like coming from your golden augment, it just kind of like goes away. That's sort of like a lot of lost value. So like that's one of the things where if you optimize a bit more, it probably becomes a first just off of like a little bit different itemization, right?
Okay. Okay. So my kind of high level big picture takeaways is that really impacted this game is 2-1 slamming that Titans on Yasuo when I was level 3. So not only was I level 3, so it's like not that likely that I'm gonna streak, but
Mm-hmm.
Titans is not a good slam on Yasuo, and then Titans also, if I'm trying to play this AP flex line, doesn't really support much of anything.
Yeah, yeah.
That was like probably the biggest mistake that I made that kind of amplified everything at the start of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second augment, the Hodge, just really helping one unit as opposed to team wide, especially if I'm trying to go level 9. And then
Yeah, yeah.
at level 9 trying to go 10 when I didn't, so not properly identifying that my front line was the biggest weakness of my team, particularly in some of the fights that occurred that were actually quite close. That I should
Yeah,
have been
yeah.
focused on upgrading my front line instead of going 10.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely like I'd say in terms of like what ended up impacting your placement this game the most, it's probably because all it came down to, at least in this example, right, based off of how the lobby played out, the most important thing was what happened with your items in the late game, or I'd say like the Hodge thing versus the harm assist thing. Like that's probably the biggest thing, just
Mhm.
because I think you do actually win a lot of these fights if you had harm assist in comparison to just the idealism. But the one that's more applicable to every game is that the frontline comparison is really like,
Right.
do you have upgraded frontline to win the fights? That because that's applicable across any type of front to back, right? Whatever you're playing, if your front line isn't there, like it's the same thing with reroll, right? If I'm playing reroll Cog or if I'm playing reroll Bard, right? If I don't have 3-star Cho'Gath or if I don't have 3-star Kench, I'm not going to win the game. Even though I might have the most stacked backline carry, if my front line isn't there, then it's not going to hold up. So it's that's a big thing I see actually like in a lot of sort of I'll look at lol chesses and
Hmm.
a lot of the times when people are losing, if you just look at their front row, right? If it's not 2-starred on the front row, or like if they don't actually have a tank, then that's where a lot of the losses are coming from. So
Makes
yeah,
sense.
I'd say like here, the most important thing is probably just the front row itemization and prioritization just kind of needed like a bit more, and then you probably end up going first instead of second.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah, yeah.
Any other kind of big takeaways from you before we wrap up?
I think overall, I mean, the game itself was pretty good. I think like the being able to win streak for that long off of the board, being able to pivot into Yone was really nice. I do want like the one thing I'll mention is just the unit prioritization and like getting dizzy.
Mm.
Sometimes you just have to like sometimes you just gotta commit. It's gonna help you out a lot. Like you know, I think the worst games that I have are when I just go level 8 and I still don't know what I'm playing, right? I have no sense of what I'm going to play. Like sometimes it works out, but that's like a miracle if it works out. Like most of the cases is like if I don't have direction on level, like by the time it's level 8 and I still don't have direction, then it's like it's pretty much I'm definitely going to die because you just spend so
Yeah.
much resources and you like waste so much time trying to think about what you can and can't fit on your board that it's just like, oh, it's pretty much you're pretty much dead in the water, right? So like obviously you can sort of afford to be a bit flexible with your front line, but I think like general rule of thumb is once you see sort of like a frontliner that you want to play around, you kind of want to index a bit more towards that direction and build
Hmm.
out your front line in that way. It doesn't it doesn't have to be the best frontliner, but if you're saying, okay, this is what I have and this is what I want to play towards, then you sell what you don't need and you just buy everything that goes into to that direction. It helps out a lot. Um, and when you can do that, I think that roll downs are faster. You make more econ. Just in general, pretty solid to sort of have a specific kind of direction. So in this case, right, I think like towards the end game, you had a lot of the Dragon Lords. You just play more on the Dragon Lord side. I think that honestly, at this point in the game, you can also probably drop the Ornn
Hmm.
if you really had to and play something like a Wukong.
Although I don't think I ever saw Wukong,
Yeah,
but
I don't think you
yeah.
did either. Yeah, but it's just stuff like that. I think that
But yeah, I mean, if I rolled down
yeah,
670 gold here at level 9, I should have been able to find something.
yeah. Like the front line for sure could have looked a little bit better. But yeah, I guess the main thing is like the other thing here is like you don't need to go 10, right? Like there's like what exactly are you getting from pushing 10?
Yeah,
It's just some of those questions you got to ask yourself. Like
yeah,
what is more worth it? Sometimes it's like all of the trade-offs. If Why would I roll for a 3-star 4 cost, or do I want to push a level, right? It's sort of like similar things. It's like how exactly is it changing my game here, and like how likely is it that I'm going to hit? If I push level 10 and I don't have any gold, then I for sure am not hitting any frontline, right? But what exactly does it afford you to push level 10 here, right? What can you fit in versus, oh, I can just roll for, maybe upgraded Rakan. I could transition off of some of these other units. I could get some of the other legendaries. I might be able to fit an Udyr on the board instead of the Lilia, stuff like that, right? And that's stuff that, just evaluating it. But yeah, frontline, very, very important.
okay, makes
Yeah.
sense. All right, thanks for the first session. It was really helpful. I think this is really useful for me to fix some of the stuff I'm doing with this Fast 9 strat.